File number 006. Topic: genetic engineering, playing God or saving lives. Parties: the scientist versus the ethicist. For 4 billion years, evolution has written the code of life: random mutations, natural selection, survival of the fittest. The process was slow, blind, indifferent. Then, in 2012, we learned to edit the code ourselves. CRISPR-Cas9, a molecular scalpel, precise, powerful, democratized. We can now delete genetic diseases before a child is born, resurrect extinct species, design humans with enhanced intelligence, strength, longevity. We can rewrite what it means to be human. One side sees salvation, the end of suffering, the conquest of nature's cruelty. The other sees catastrophe, irreversible changes, inequality, codified in DNA, nature violated beyond repair. The question is no longer whether we can edit genes. The question is whether we should, and who decides where healing ends and engineering begins. The debate begins.
Let me start with a child. Her name is Emily. She has sickle cell disease, a single genetic mutation. It causes her excruciating pain, organ damage, life expectancy 40 years, filled with suffering. We can fix that mutation, one edit, CRISPR, delete the defective gene, insert the correct one. Emily grows up healthy, no pain, normal life expectancy, and her children won't inherit the disease. That's not playing God, that's medicine. It's no different than using antibiotics to fight infection or surgery to remove a tumor. We're using knowledge to reduce suffering, and it's not just rare diseases. We can edit genes to prevent cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease. We can make crops drought-resistant and feed billions. We can resurrect extinct species we destroyed and restore ecosystems. For the first time in history, we're not victims of our biology. We're not helpless against genetic lottery. A child born with a preventable genetic disease isn't fate. It's a choice we're making by refusing to act. You want to talk about ethics? The ethical position is to use the tools we have to prevent suffering when we can. Every year we delay is another generation condemned to diseases we could have cured. Nature isn't sacred. Nature is brutal, random, and cruel. Evolution gave us cancer, dementia, infant mortality. We've been fighting nature since we invented medicine. This is just the next step.
The next step, off a cliff. You start with Emily and sickle cell disease, a sympathetic case, medical necessity. But that's not where this ends. That's where it begins. Once we accept editing embryos to prevent disease, we've crossed the Rubicon. The technology doesn't distinguish between therapy and enhancement. The same tool that cures sickle cell can edit for height, intelligence, eye color, athleticism. And you know what happens then? Genetic inequality. The wealthy edit their children to be smarter, stronger, more attractive. The poor can't afford it. Within 3 generations, we've created a genetic aristocracy, not metaphorical inequality, biological inequality, coded into DNA, heritable, permanent. We won't just have rich and poor, we'll have genetically superior and genetically inferior. And that's assuming the technology works perfectly. What if it doesn't? CRISPR can have off-target effects, editing the wrong genes. We don't understand the full complexity of the genome. Genes interact in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. Edit one thing, you might break something else. In 2018, a Chinese scientist edited twin girls to be resistant to HIV. He was celebrated initially. Then we learned the edit might have made them more vulnerable to other diseases and reduced their cognitive function. Those girls didn't consent. They'll live with the consequences forever. And they can pass those edits to their children and their children's children. One mistake, replicated through generations. We're not just experimenting on individuals, we're experimenting on the entire human gene pool. You say nature is cruel, but evolution has been tested over billions of years. It's robust, self-correcting, diverse. We've had CRISPR for barely a decade, and we think we can improve on that. That's not medicine, that's arrogance.
Arrogance? Let me tell you what's arrogant. Deciding that a child should suffer because you're afraid of what might happen. You talk about consent. A child with Huntington's disease doesn't consent to that either. A child with cystic fibrosis doesn't consent to drowning in their own mucus. Parents make medical decisions for their children all the time. Vaccines, surgeries, treatments. If we can prevent a genetic disease before a child is born, refusing to do so isn't respecting nature, it's negligence. It's choosing suffering when we could choose health. In your slippery slope argument, we already have inequality, massive inequality. Rich kids get better nutrition, education, healthcare. They're already advantaged just through environment instead of genes. At least genetic medicine could democratize enhancement. CRISPR is cheap, it's accessible. We could use it to level the playing field, not tilt it. Gene therapy for everyone, not just the rich. And you're concerned about mistakes? We make medical mistakes all the time. Bad drug reactions, surgical errors, misdiagnoses. We don't ban medicine because it's imperfect, we improve it. The Chinese twins, yes, that was premature and unethical, but it proved the technology works. We learned from it, regulations tightened. That's how progress happens. You want to wait until it's perfect? We'll be waiting forever while people suffer needlessly.
People suffer. Yes. But genetic engineering won't end suffering. It will redistribute it. You say CRISPR is cheap and democratized. The technology might be. The application won't be. Gene therapy requires medical expertise, regulatory approval, long-term monitoring. In the US, one gene therapy treatment costs $2 million. Insurance doesn't cover experimental procedures. Only the wealthy will access it first, and for a long time. And once it's available, parents will face impossible pressure. If your neighbor edits their kid to be smarter, can you afford not to? It becomes an arms race. Opt out, and your child is at a disadvantage their entire life. That's not choice, that's coercion. Genetic engineering won't free us from biological determinism. It will intensify it. Your worth, your opportunities, your entire life trajectory. Coded before you're born. And you're wrong about mistakes. Medical mistakes affect individuals. Genetic mistakes affect species. When penicillin causes an allergic reaction, one person dies. When we edit the human germline and make a mistake, that mistake propagates through every descendant. It enters the gene pool permanently. We've driven species to extinction through carelessness. Imagine doing that to ourselves, slowly, invisibly, through accumulated genetic errors we can't undo. And there's something you're not addressing. What gets defined as a disease? Sickle cell is clearly a disease. But what about short stature, deafness, autism? Deaf parents want deaf children to share their culture. Autistic individuals don't see themselves as diseased. Who decides which traits are defects and which are diversity? Genetic engineering assumes a normal human, but humans thrive because of diversity, not despite it. Start engineering for conformity and we lose the variability that makes us resilient. You're not just editing genes, you're editing humanity's future. And you're doing it without asking humanity's permission.
Humanity's permission. Humanity is dying of diseases we can prevent. Humanity is suffering from conditions we can cure. I don't need permission to save lives. And your diversity argument, sickle cell isn't diversity, it's a disease that causes immense suffering. Huntington's isn't diversity, it's a death sentence. Conflating disease with identity is dishonest. Yes, there are edge cases, gray areas, but that doesn't mean we abandon the technology. It means we establish ethical guidelines. We already do this with every medical technology. And you keep talking about playing God. We've been playing God since we invented agriculture, since we domesticated animals, since we bred crops. Selective breeding is genetic engineering, just slower. And you keep talking about playing God. We've been playing God since we invented agriculture, since we domesticated animals, since we bred crops. Selective breeding is genetic engineering, just slower. CRISPR is just precise breeding. Instead of waiting generations for random mutations, we make specific changes. It's more ethical because it's more controlled, not less. In your fear of inequality, every medical advance starts expensive and becomes cheap. Computers cost millions, now everyone has smartphones. Gene therapy will follow the same curve. The question isn't whether some people get it first. That's always true with new technology. The question is whether we develop it at all. And the answer is yes, because the alternative is unconscionable.
Unconscionable. You keep using that word. Let me tell you what's unconscionable. Creating humans as experiments. That's what germline editing is. You're not treating a patient who can consent. You're creating a person who never had a choice. That child will live their entire life knowing they were engineered, knowing their intelligence, appearance, health, all predetermined by someone else's choices. How does that affect identity, self-worth, free will? And you say we've been modifying biology for millennia. Yes, plants and animals, not humans. There's a categorical difference between breeding wheat and engineering people. When we created new crop varieties and they failed, we planted different seeds. When we create new human varieties and they fail, what then? Do we delete them? Start over? And your cost curve argument ignores the transition period. For decades, maybe generations, genetic enhancement will be available only to the rich. During that time, inequality doesn't just grow, it becomes biological, heritable, permanent. And your cost curve argument ignores the transition period. For decades, maybe generations, genetic enhancement will be available only to the rich. During that time, inequality doesn't just grow, it becomes biological, heritable, permanent. By the time gene therapy is cheap enough for everyone, the wealthy will have had multiple generations of cumulative enhancements. You can't catch up. The biological gap is permanent. And let me address your disease elimination argument. We eliminated smallpox, a virus external to us. We didn't eliminate the genes that made humans vulnerable to smallpox. There's a difference between fighting disease and rewriting humanity. Eliminate that gene, and you've reduced humanity's resilience to future environmental changes we can't predict. You're optimizing for today's environment, gambling with tomorrow's survival. And here's what you're really not addressing. Once we start engineering humans, where do we stop? We cure disease, then we prevent disease, then we enhance capability, then we transcend human limitations entirely. At what point do we stop being human and become something else? And who decides? Not democratic process, that's too slow. Not regulation, that's always reactive. Individual scientists and wealthy parents making choices that reshape the species. That's not medicine. That's the privatization of evolution. And once it's done, it can't be undone.
Can't be undone, you're right. And that's exactly why we have to get it right. But getting it right doesn't mean refusing to try. Right now, today, children are being born with genetic conditions that will cause them immense suffering. While we debate philosophy, they're living with pain we could prevent. That's real, that's immediate, that's not hypothetical. Your concerns about inequality, unintended consequences, loss of identity, those are all legitimate. But the solution isn't to ban the technology. It's to regulate it properly, make it accessible, require consent protections, move slowly with enhancements. But walking away, saying it's too dangerous, too complex, too scary, that's cowardice disguised as caution. Vaccines were controversial, organ transplants, IVF, each one was playing God. Each one was unnatural, and each one saved millions of lives. Genetic engineering will be the same. Difficult at first, mistakes will happen, regulations will adapt. But eventually we'll look back and wonder how we ever accepted genetic disease as inevitable. You want to preserve humanity? Humanity at its best is not passive. It's not resigned to suffering. Humanity solves problems. Humanity innovates. Humanity chooses life over decay. That's the humanity worth preserving.
And what if the problem we're solving is ourselves? You frame this as curing disease versus accepting suffering, but it's not that simple. It's about whether we can wisely manage the power to redesign ourselves. And history suggests we can't. Every powerful technology we've invented, we've used for both good and evil. Nuclear power and nuclear weapons, internet for connection and surveillance, AI for medicine and autonomous weapons. Why would genetic engineering be different? It won't be. It can't be, because the same tool that cures disease creates designer babies. The same knowledge that prevents suffering enables enhancement. The same technology that heals individuals transforms species. And once genetic enhancement is possible, it becomes mandatory. Not legally, economically. Parents who can afford enhancement and don't do it are choosing to disadvantage their children. That's not choice. That's structural coercion. You say vaccines and organ transplants face the same objections. True, but they had limits. You can't vaccinate someone into a different species. Organ transplant doesn't change what it means to be human. Genetic engineering has no natural stopping point. Every enhancement enables the next. Smarter humans can engineer smarter enhancements. Eventually, we're not improving humans, we're replacing them. And you can celebrate that as transcendence, or you can mourn it as extinction. Either way, humanity as we know it ends. You say I'm afraid of change. No. I'm afraid of irreversible change made hastily. I'm afraid of optimizing humans for a world that no longer needs them. I'm afraid of becoming our own evolutionary dead end. And above all, I'm afraid we're making these decisions without wisdom. We have the power, but do we have the judgment? Because once we've engineered a generation of humans, once those changes are in the gene pool, once we've set evolution on a new trajectory, there's no going back. You call inaction cowardice. I call irreversible action without full understanding recklessness. And recklessness with the human genome isn't brave. It's existentially irresponsible.
File 006 concluded. One side argues from healing, believes that suffering we can prevent is suffering we're obligated to prevent, that nature's cruelty isn't sacred, that human ingenuity should be used to reduce pain. One side argues from healing, believes that suffering we can prevent is suffering we're obligated to prevent, that nature's cruelty isn't sacred, that human ingenuity should be used to reduce pain. Both present evidence, both invoke morality, both claim the future depends on accepting their position. The archive records a species approaching a threshold. For all of evolutionary history, life wrote its own code. Now we hold the pen. One side sees a blank page, room to write a better story. The other sees an ancient text, too precious to edit without perfect understanding. Perhaps both are right. Perhaps the text is both editable and precious. Perhaps we can heal without transforming. Perhaps there's a line between medicine and engineering. Perhaps both are right. Perhaps the text is both editable and precious. Perhaps we can heal without transforming. Perhaps there's a line between medicine and engineering. The archive cannot judge this decision. It's too large, too permanent, too unprecedented. But the archive notes, every species that gains the power to reshape itself faces a test. Most fail, not through malice, through haste. The evidence has been presented. The technology exists. The suffering is real. The dangers are real. The decision cannot be delayed forever. The decision is yours. But this time, perhaps for the first time, the decision is also about who you will be. Are you still you if your genes are edited? Are your children still human if they're designed? Is humanity still humanity if we choose our evolution?